words that simply say, you are an unceasing spiritual being with an eternal destiny in God's great universe.
I'm tempted to sit down at this point and declare my paper redundant, because if only every professor at secular colleges and universities did what Chris was doing, then what I'm about to suggest would be redundant. But unfortunately, that is not the case. The title of my remarks this afternoon is, How Can We Knit Together Life with God and the Life of the Mind at Secular Colleges and Universities? And I feel as though I need to start by bleating. I feel a degree of sheepishness as I begin this afternoon for at least two reasons. Firstly, because I'm going to be thinking about secular colleges and universities where for the last 14 years I've been working and teaching at Westmont. In my defense on that score, I would say that all of my education was at much more secular places, and so when I came here it was a great cross-cultural event. And then secondly, on that front, I'm just eager to have some conversation and to really throw out some ideas which in many respects come from my own, these are questions which have come from my own experience really as an undergraduate back many years ago. And I am very confident there are people in the room who will have better thoughts on much of this than I do. The second reason why I'm feeling a little sheepish at the beginning is typically one comes to papers in order to receive something. Today I feel as though it's going to be me who's doing the asking. By the time I get to the end of my remarks, you may be sitting there thinking, is that it? To which the answer is yes, it really is. I have some thoughts, I have some questions, and I'm glad for the opportunity to maybe steal some answers and thoughts from some of you. Let me start with what I hope is a fairly uncontroversial position at a gathering like this, that all truth is God's truth, not just spiritual truth, not just biblical truth. That the God who made the world is interested not just in scripture and spirituality, but is equally interested in chemistry and society. And not only can we have knowledge of chemistry and knowledge of society, but we can also have knowledge of God, and that together all of this knowledge forms a unified whole. And that's why I enjoy teaching here so much. Every time I'm tempted to leave, I think of people like Jim, who's a philosophy professor here, and this other Jim who teaches in off-campus programs, and just the wonderful community of scholars here who we have, and the way we get on so well together learning from one another with this shared commitment to seeking to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, the life of the mind and the life of faith and with God. However, as I've already hinted, my own experience was very, very different in terms of education. I went as a fresh-faced undergraduate at 18 to an institution of higher education, which wasn't entirely secular, but it was largely secular, and probably only one of my many professors as an undergraduate would have identified as a Christian. And with my fellow Christians at the university, we took pleasure in identifying the most anti-Christian professors and trying in a way that was probably so Mauric as to not really be sophomoric to try and to take them on. And then my path through a whole variety of different chapters brought me here to Westmont, which, as I said, I enjoy tremendously. And yet, as I spend my years here, I never forget my own experience of being an undergraduate and really of having no idea whatsoever how my faith might relate to my studies. I saw my degree in history as an obstacle to my walk with God, and so I consequently gave it as little of my time as I possibly could. I don't tell my current students that. Oops, sorry. That's how one of my students there at the back. And part of that was I wasn't in a church, which really helped me to understand how these things could go together. So as I spend my days here, I think regularly of the majority of Christian students in the world who don't have the privilege of being at a place like this and who don't have professors who are going to actively help them to think about how their faith and their learning might connect. And the results, as we know, are so often a fairly bifurcated life of mind and soul. Now, there's a very important caveat that I need to enter at this point, is that obviously at secular institutions there are many Christian professors like Chris. Obviously there are churches which do a much better job than my own church did of seeking to help Christian students at non-Christian universities. And there are many staff workers with parachurch ministries who help students on this front, and many good books as well. However, as I've thought through all of this, I'm left asking whether there's a missing piece. Even if you do have the privilege of going to a more secular university, and even if your church or your parachurch ministry is committed to the idea of, let's just call it the integration of faith and learning for now, it's unlikely, I think, that in most of those situations you're going to get help which is specific to your particular discipline. So you may go to UCLA to study physics, and you may be in a Christian group which is really going to say you should care about how your faith and your physics relate. But it may be unlikely that the people who are encouraging in that direction know very much about physics. So there's kind of some elementary help which some of these folk may be able to give you. On the other hand, there are some wonderful, wonderful books in I think pretty much every discipline which are aimed at either graduate students or very eager undergraduate students, which will help you think about Christianity and history, Christianity and biology, whatever it might be. What I'm interested in thinking about is there a possibility of providing some introductory resources to first-year students, whether in general education courses or major courses, and not just in the United States, but globally as well? Something which pastors, something which staff workers could give to first-year students as a way of saying, here, you're a student, God is excited that you're a student, and here's just a few things that you may want to think about as you embark on your degree in political science, or as you are required to take this course in English literature. So, I'm done, and here are my two questions. Here's what I want from you as we move on to discussion, and Chris has already provided, I think, some of the answers here. But firstly, am I alone in my sense that something like this could be useful? It may be that there's already something else out there that I just haven't stumbled across yet, in which case I'd love to know that. But I feel as though Christian academics have done a wonderful job of writing these books which are pitched pretty high about the philosophy of Christianity and whatever their discipline is. But those really aren't much use to the 18-year-olds who are starting off and who I think could really perhaps do with somebody saying, hey, you know, God actually cares about your studies, and there are ways in which you can bring that together with what you believe. And then if there is a need, does anybody have any great ideas as to a possible format and how we might go about meeting that need? I'll throw out the two that I've had. One would be to have a series of animated YouTube videos, which are just, 8 minutes long, Christianity and history. You know the sort, I'm sure. There's some clever person who's done some great graphics which go over what can often be a fairly basic and straightforward narrative. I wonder whether something like that, if it's something especially which could be findable just on a standard YouTube search by somebody who's maybe just thinking, hey, I wonder whether Christianity's got anything to do with this engineering degree that I'm embarking on. And then the second idea that has been rattling around my brain has been whether there's a way in which one could produce basic devotional guides which for new students put together a particular academic discipline and Bible study, prayer, other spiritual disciplines as well, that pastors or staff workers could give to young undergraduates, put it in their hand and say, here's a 2-week devotional. I know that you're taking a course in Spanish, or you're taking a course in sociology. In a sense, taking the student from perhaps where they're already at, maybe having been nurtured in a church or in a youth group where they know that they should read the Bible, they know that they should pray, and using that basic discipline that hopefully is in place in their life to help introduce them to some of these ways of thinking about how God is interested in more than Scripture, is interested in more than prayer, in a way that hopefully they have already learned in their youth groups. So those are my questions. And as we move on to discussion now, we have over half an hour. Chris and I think, will just perch on chairs here at the front, if that's okay. And would love to make this as interactive as possible. So thank you for listening, and we'll now hand it over to discussion.